Now turning to our program, please welcome Jim Fitzhenry, Community Engagement Director of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
I'm very honored today to have the opportunity to introduce my colleague and friend, Greg Borowski, Executive Editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. As Greg is approaching the third anniversary of coming into that job, he often jokes that editor years are something akin to dog years. So if you do the math on that, that's between 21 and 50 years that he's been editor of the newspaper. And when you look at everything happening in the world and in our community, it's not such a stretch. Greg is a Milwaukee native and graduate of Mesmer High School and Marquette University. It's at Marquette that I first met Greg a few years ago when we both worked at the Marquette Tribune. Although many years have passed, there's a few more gray hairs on both of our heads and a few more inches at the waist. Greg is very much the same person I met at Marquette, working in the basement of Johnston Hall at the time at the Tribune. Serious, funny, talented, and singularly focused on excellence. After graduating from Marquette, he had stints at newspapers in Indiana and Michigan, but Greg is a Milwaukee guy at heart, and so he came back here to work at the Journal Sentinel to cover City Hall and politics, where he later went on to oversee the newsroom's award-winning investigative team and then the local news operation. Greg is a very serious person, and when you get to meet him and get to talk to him, it's sometimes hard to imagine that he actually writes short stories about Christmas, and those stories are featured every year in the newspaper. He's also authored a book on a groundbreaking high school football team. He and his wife, Katie, live in Bayview with their daughter, Annalise. Please give me a warm rotary welcome for Greg Borowski.
All right, thank you, Jim, for that great introduction, and thanks everyone for braving the cold to be here today. And thanks to Dave Haynes and Melissa for helping put this together with the invitation. Aaron Richards on our staff, who many of you probably know as well. I wanted to quickly introduce, again, you heard their names of some of our staff members who are here. And I want you to remember their name and their face because there's a little bit of a homework assignment for you guys in the room. So we've got Rachel Piper, I need you to kind of wave or something over there. She's our deputy editor for news projects and investigations. So she oversees the news operation. Lainey Seiler is our deputy editor for audience. So she covers the breaking news team, the trending team, the visuals team, and how to get you to that news online. Kanala Phillips is our new, I can still say new because it's less than a year, 6 months or so as editor of Neighborhood Dispatch, which is our new neighborhoods initiative. And I think there's Jim Nelson is at the same table. He's our business editor. So again, remember those names and faces. So as Jim mentioned, I started in this role in March of 2023. He gets my joke part right in that editor's years are like dog years. And I always throw in that election years count double. And because I'm the father of a teenager, by my count, I've been in this role approximately 72 years, okay? Now those 72 years have been particularly challenging period to be in the news business. I started to notice how challenging it is when I'm introduced to anyone in person and they find out what I do and they have sort of this response of, oh, that's great. And they kind of wonder what I'm going to say. Then they pat me on the arm, and it's like they're feeling sympathy for me. And they say, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "No one died. My dog didn't die. I don't even have a dog." So, you know. But sometimes I look up above me as if I've got this cloud kind of following me around wherever I go because I'm in the media. And now you guys are all looking up, so I'm pretty confident. Okay, there's no cloud. Anyways, if you guys were expecting a heavy conversation today filled with doom and gloom, you're in the wrong place. These are the things we're not going to talk about today, at least in part of my presentation, okay? We're not going to talk about the decline of newspapers. artificial intelligence, partisan divides, lack of trust, decline of democracy. I'm not going to quote de Tocqueville for you today. We're not going to talk about economic challenges, vitriol and violence, splintering audience, news deserts, or attacks on the First Amendment. That's not to say those things are not important or not happening. We see them and experience them every day. And that's why I always get that pat on the arm from people like, oh my gosh, how are you doing over there? But when combined, I think we're in the most challenging time ever to be in this industry. I've been at the Journal Sentinel for almost 28 years, in the industry for almost 35, so I have a bit of perspective on that. We're dealing with more change, more rapidly, with more at stake, perhaps than ever before. So every day can be filled with obstacles, pitfalls, hurdles, outright antagonism. Every single day it can be wearying and thankless. It requires a special commitment to the community and to our colleagues. It'd be tough if we were facing one of these things, or just a few, because each brings its own pressure on the work we do. But here's the thing, we can respond to those challenges, and we do, but we can't really control them. So the worries, when you have them, can lead to a lot of wheel spinning. So what we can control is what we're going to talk about today, which is the work, okay? The work of journalism, the work of our newsroom, the stories we tell, where we put our energy, what happens when we tell our stories well, the reaction we get, and the difference we make in our community. I just put a little marker here. I said our community, so remember that, not the community, our community. The work is what sustains all of us, the people in this room and the people back at the newsroom, and the work is how you guys experience us. All of those other things are in the background. When you find us online or pick up a newspaper, you're experiencing the work, not our own basket of challenges. Really it's probably more than a basket. It's like a truck full of challenges. But if you want to know what's happening in the ball game, who won, who scored what, or if that new restaurant is worth going to, if you're wondering what business is going in on the corner, what that common council vote means, you're not much concerned about the problems and the challenges we're facing. The work is primarily how you engage with us and how we engage with you, so that's going to be what I focus on today. So what we're going to talk about today, real briefly, are what we're doing at the Journal Sentinel, why it's working, we think, where we're going as best as we know, and can it be a model for others, and we sure hope so. All the things we're doing, we have to get them right because of all of those other things going on out in the world. They're real and they're destructive, and that's why those 3 years I've been in this job actually feel so long and so short at the same time. So I'm going to share some slides that if you were a member of our newsroom, you've seen many times, but they get at the focus we're trying to have every single day. So the first one is to be connected. It seems obvious, as a journalist you have to know what's happening, but you have to be connected, you have to really understand the people we're telling the stories about. You have to be able to frame those stories to increase understanding and deliver them where people are looking for them, when they're looking for them. As I mentioned before, the phrase that not this community, but to tell these stories for our community. Everyone in our newsroom are also parents, volunteers, customers, tenants, churchgoers. There are many transplants, but a lot of natives. When taxes go up, we pay them too. When streets are not safe, we worry about our families as well. So we're invested in this community as much as anybody, so we have to really be connected. The second thing is to be essential. When I say that, when I usually add to be as essential as a cup of coffee. Okay, so if you think about it, we need people, like with your cup of coffee, to come to us every day, probably more than once, and where you can't imagine a day without us, because we are doing our job so well, we're so connected and providing information that is valuable and useful. And like that cup of coffee, we do like folks to pay for us as well. That's an essential part of it. The good news is we're a lot cheaper than a coffee habit. So if you want to get a news habit, it'll be a little cheaper for you. Then I put those together and say essential plus connected equals growth. And if we're doing the first two things well, we're growing. So I want to do a little thought experiment here. One of the measurements we use out of many for how we're growing is overall page views to JS Online. So I want you to take a minute, just think about in your head how many page views you think we get every day on average, and tell the person next to you. So I want to hold everybody accountable for what they think, because we're going to see how close you got. Just take a second, tell somebody what your number is. All right. Okay, so everybody's got your guess in. All right. This is the accountability portion of the program. Okay, we're going to get back to it. Okay. Some great debate. Okay. All right. Okay, so here's the answer for you. On average, if we're having a good day, we're getting 1 million page views. Okay, so if you got even close, raise your hand. If you got close to the 1 million with your guess, raise your hand. This is the accountability portion. Okay, how many people guessed higher and how many people guessed higher? Okay, a couple of people believe in us. How many guessed lower? Everybody else, okay? We had, in the month of August last year, 38 million page views. Our page views have gone up 5% in the last year, and when you put them on top of 2024, our growth has been 34% over 2023. So I'm hoping sharing that in part to just maybe put a different spin on why people shouldn't think there's a cloud following me around all the time. Okay, then I finish our equation with growth, growth equals stability. We're not at stability yet because the world keeps changing, but we're getting a lot closer. In the newsroom, we have a team of about 100. That's smaller than before, but it's still far, far bigger and more experienced than any other newsroom in the state. We know there are a lot of studies out there about what happens when newsrooms shrink, or worse, close. You've probably heard some of the statistics, the lack of information, civic leaders without oversight, taxes going up, bad things happen. But I want to focus on the opposite because we've got an example playing out right now in our newsroom about what happens when you add something to the community. When you add something, you get to meet people like this. So this picture is Richard Clark and Lawrence Roth. They're from the Metcalf Park neighborhood. And on August 20th of last year, they were at home when a motorcyclist had a car accident with a reckless driver, severed his leg, the motorcyclist did, and these two men ran out. One of them was an Army medic. They used jumper cables as a tourniquet and saved that man's life. Now, we heard about that story because April Quevedo, one of our newest reporters on Canala's team, was out in that neighborhood listening. That story would not have been told if she was not there listening for it. And if you think a little bit about what your impressions might be of the Metcalf Park neighborhood, which is located around 35th and Center, and think about how this story might change that perspective and how important it is to tell those stories. You meet people like this. This is Margaret Calvin, who lives at a senior apartment complex in the Harambe neighborhood. Now, she and others worked with reporter Everett Eaton and photojournalist Angelica Edwards and also reporter Natalie Albert to tell about the rampant drug use that was going on in their apartment, how younger people from the neighborhood had basically taken over and left them feeling they were held hostage in the place where they live. By telling that story, we were able to prompt, raise awareness and prompt change and make a difference. Again, that story would have been missed if we didn't have a reporter out there listening for it. This one is Anna Zarnowski. She lives in the Layton Boulevard West neighborhood on the near south side. And what's in the picture, you can't see the full effect of it, is garbage that was being dumped in that neighborhood on the railroad right-of-way. And what that neighborhood and those residents were facing was they couldn't get action from the city. The city said it's the railroad's responsibility. They couldn't get the railroad to listen to them. But when Alyssa Salcedo told that story, and told it a few times and got people's attention, we got that, our effort got that neighborhood cleaned up. All of those cited, those three reporters and Angelica Edwards, are part of our new neighborhood dispatch team, which started 6 months ago. Kanala is the editor on it, as a pilot effort, and it was aimed at doing a better job in our neighborhoods, where candidly, we as an institution had not done a good job over the years of telling stories and providing a complete picture of that neighborhood. We had pulled back for logical reasons of finances. We had lost connection. We primarily showed up when the police tape went up or a politician had a news conference. So we had lost that connection. The program was created with support from Bader Philanthropies, Zober Family Foundation, Northwestern Mutual Foundation, the Journal Foundation, and the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. It was a pilot effort of an area we're trying to move into to provide more support for our newsroom. Now, this is the team in the picture. It includes, so Kanala's on the left, and then April, Alyssa, Angelica, and Everett. Their job is to be in these neighborhoods, listening first, not telling stories about a community or even for a community, but telling the stories with that community. And those stories have been not just about problems, but celebrations, moments of pride. We've been working to elevate voices, build connections, and listen relentlessly to what people are doing. One hallmark of this team's effort was an idea that Kanala brought to the table, was that those on it should do volunteer work in the neighborhood they're covering. Okay, so if you think about that, volunteer work is great, but it also helps show why we're there. We're there in a positive way. It helps build connections. It helps create greater understanding. And if you're picking up trash with somebody for an hour, you're probably bound to get to know them a little bit. So that's been great. It's part of a change that we've been trying to make across beats. Within our education beat, we have a panel of teachers now that helps guide our coverage. We've gone out to do neighborhood meetings with our investigative team to teach people about open records requests and how to use the open records law. Very well attended, very welcome, because we've come out in a more humble place where we start from. We relaunched under my time the public investigator team, which is focused on quicker turn investigations, not just the longest ones, but quicker ones. And I'll use a real brief example there of, we did a story on a 95-year-old woman. I should have put her picture in here, but didn't fish it out, who was about to be evicted from her apartment wrongfully. We wrote that story and prevented her from being evicted. What happened next was residents in that same community came forward in that same apartment complex and said, you should hear about this and this and this, and all the problems they had. And as we were reporting that story, a former public official who was working for as a lobbyist now for that apartment complex called me up and said, Greg, this is not a story. I said, why is this not a story? And the response was, well, if you looked at any apartment complex on the north side of Milwaukee, they have similar problems. And I said, that is why it's a story. Okay, that's why it's a story. We've got to be that connected. So the neighborhoods team is one of several where we have grant-funded support now, where we've built relationships with funders and with average members of the community to help us sustain and grow reporting where we've pulled back in the past. The 4 areas include Great Lakes and the environment, where Caitlin Luby is doing a great job in that role. Education, where Kayla Hinn is our new reporter there. Arts and culture, we have a reporter started last week. Anya Cisse, who's going to help us build that area, and of course neighborhoods. All told, we have staff members, we have 8 staff members, thanks to large donors and individuals who are giving us sometimes $25 a week, sometimes $1,000 a month. They see a need to fill this gap. For each of the areas we tackle, we have a principle around, we try to get a 3-year pilot, so we have some runway to make a difference. We try to get multiple groups to support us. We get community support as well, and we have engagement money to get people out in the community to see and work with our reporters. So this is a way for us to own the future despite all of the challenges and things that are going on there. And every time we do and get out there and become a little more essential, a little more connected, it means a little more growth, a little more stability. Now, it's not an easy path by any means, I mentioned these folks on here, and I apologize, I don't have Jim Nelson on there, but these are the ones, I'm putting their contact information up here, so if you want to snap a picture of it, and also to highlight that URL at the bottom, jsonline.com/support, which is where you can learn a lot more information about what we're up to. A true friend of all this for us has been Mary McCormick, so thank you to her as we've tried to build this going. But here's your assignment. If you see any of these people afterwards, thank them. Okay, truly, I try to thank everybody in my newsroom as much as I can. I don't do it enough, but they don't hear it enough, particularly if you're an editor, from people in the community. The next time you see something as an additional challenge from one of our journalists, a story you like, a photo gallery, send a note or post that story or share that story and tell a friend about that story. So we are good at telling stories at the Journal Sentinel. Not so much about telling our own story, but if you care about our community, and I know you do, I hope you can help us tell that story. I have 2 more slides. This is me on my first day. You can send your thanks and things to me. I can always get it to the right person. But, so this was the first day I got the job 72 years ago. I'm always mindful about what we do as a team effort. So as I wrap up, I want to go back to that day. That's the image from me presenting the speech. Just look how young I look there. I mean, there's not a cloud in sight. It's the first day. But in my speech, I said a couple things. The first was that this is not my newsroom. This is our newsroom. And by our newsroom, I meant the community's newsroom, because this is what stains us, our community, and where we need to be oriented. And the last thing I did that day was end on 3 questions, and I'm going to read them here. So I know you guys especially, can see how questions can really empower you and give you focus. So these are the questions that I wanted people to ask themselves every day when they leave the office. Did I work on the best possible story I could have worked on today? Did I tell that story well so as to make a difference in our community? Did I lift up someone around me and help them do their best work? And I said, if each day all of us can answer yes to all 3 questions, we're going to be fine. So far, I think we're doing all right. I hope you agree. And I have time for some questions, so thank you.
Thanks so much for your time today, Greg. If you have a question for Greg, please join me up here, and remember to introduce yourself before you start your question.
Well, congratulations on your longevity. You look very well for that, going what you go through. There's a lot of conversation about the role of the news media in Minnesota and its coverage of the alleged embezzlement up there. And there are stories on both sides. The media did a good job, media didn't do a good job. Do you take away any lessons from Minnesota? And if so, how might they be applied to Wisconsin and your staff, the largest news staff in the state?
Yeah, I mean, we take lessons all the time, especially in this environment where things are changing so rapidly. And you've got to look at places like Minneapolis and wonder, what does that mean? Should that same dynamic arrive here? I mean, an important thing that, maybe one of the primary important things that a journalist does is act as a witness, right? Not a witness in court or a witness that Kent Lovern would call, but a witness to show the community what's going on and to show it, accurately. Sometimes it's referred to as holding a mirror up to the community. And by that, it should be a legitimate mirror. It shouldn't be a funhouse mirror giving you a distorted view of the community, but it should be a mirror so everyone can see and judge and try to get as much neutral information as possible. Our job when we get out there is to simply provide that information. We don't have an angle we're pushing. We don't have an agenda we're trying to reach. We're just trying to provide that. So what we're learning is certainly it reinforces the value of doing that. It certainly shows the danger of doing that. We've already had a training session in our newsroom reinforcing what we learned as we trained for the RNC and the DNC and everything else of what do you do in cases like this. And it's something that, when I started in this profession years ago, I wouldn't have imagined, that I'd have to worry about, am I going to be, arrested for witnessing what's going on and sharing that information. So that's, the lessons beyond that become, safety. It's of paramount importance for our team. I have told them, if you are in a spot where you feel unsafe, you need to leave. And if your editor says you're in a spot that's unsafe, you need to leave, because we can get that story elsewhere. There's no reason to put yourself in that danger, and it is a much more volatile, dangerous place out there right now.
Hi, thank you, Greg. This has been really interesting. My name is Megan Holbrook, and I had a question about what the experience is to be owned by a larger corporation, such as USA Today. The benefits of having the extra resources versus working with an organization that still has just under $1 billion of debt that probably affects the way that your newsroom works. If you can share any thoughts about what that's like.
I thought I had that on that slide, but we're not going to talk about.
Oh.
Did I not have that on there?
Sorry.
I thought of that one. No, we're, like anything, there's positives, there's negatives, there's different things. And I would say a value of a larger network is our ability to tell stories that can resonate across the country, and we have a much cleaner, direct path to different places. There is a great story, a project that Caitlin Luby, Maddie Heim, and Frank Vaisvillis did, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, on Great Lakes and climate change and indigenous wisdom of why aren't we listening more to the indigenous community and their knowledge on this. And we could run that story on our newspaper and our website, but it could also be on the front page of USA Today. So that great work can be amplified. If you're in a large corporation, I said it's positives and negatives. There's different things that come up. And it's no secret we're not printed in Milwaukee anymore. Our print deadlines are much earlier. There's all these sorts of things that we would do different if we could. But that large organization brings, the cost savings of, think about how expensive it is to run a printing facility. And you can't have one in every location where the papers are, because you wouldn't be able to support all the reporters that I'm talking about. We'd be in a far worse situation if we had it. So we try to, at every turn, and hopefully it came through on the presentation, is I always want us to control what we can control. We can't control a lot of those things. We can control the stories we're telling. We can control how well we're telling those stories, and control how we get those stories in front of people. And the more we do that well, the better off we're going to be. Even if we have to address all these things, we can't change a lot of them.
Hi, I'm Jenna Reno. I just had a quick question about, I love your innovative approach, and thank you for the great work you do. Are there other papers in other markets that are having outside funded positions like this?
There are, notably in places like Seattle and Minneapolis as well. In the company, we are far, in a way, at the forefront of this within the USA Today company operation. And that's part of what our team here wants to do, is control what we can control, right? Let's make a difference in this community and our community. Let's build some partnerships to allow us to do that. And let's give ourselves a little bit of a runway to turn things around and to show that there is an audience there. Someone made the decision along the way to trim back on all of these areas. And it, at the time, seemed like the right decision in the face of budget cuts and everything else. But I believe we can get into these neighborhoods, and if we do the work well and do the right work, we're going to show that there really is an audience around these topics in these areas. And once you do, there's an audience, then a business model can follow. And if the business model follows, that helps bring us to the place of stability.
Thanks for speaking to us today, Greg. My name is Steve Chevalier. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Former newspaper carrier and circulation driver, lifelong subscriber. So my question is, what is our relative circulation online versus paper? And how are the economics working out now that you've moved the print to Peoria and it's kind of changed the whole equation?
Yeah, I would say we're, and these are some numbers that I'm not really permitted to share, but I mean, we're holding our own in print, and we're doing our best and growing digitally, as I said before. I'm a former carrier myself. I was a Sentinel carrier way back in the day, so these getting up in the dark on cold mornings is not foreign to me. But I often think about, at that time, and when I started off as a reporter, we could deliver the news to you in one format, ink on paper at 6 a.m. on your doorstep. Or if my brother was working with me, it probably would be in your bushes, but I used to get it on your doorstep. And now if you think about all the different ways we can get that information, and how if you just imagine, if you have some great news in your family, someone's getting married, a new grandchild or something, and in the old model, you would have said, okay, I've got this great news. What I'm going to do is go to my typewriter, I'm going to type up that story, and then I'm going to go to Kinko's or somewhere and make a bunch of copies, and then I'm going to drive to everybody's house I want to share that information with, stand on their doorstep, ring the bell, and wait for them to read it. And then you could say, wow, isn't that great? But now think about how you can instantly build that community, talk to people in multiple places, send the video, engage people back and forth. And all of those things are what makes it pretty darn interesting to be in this business right now. If you watched any of the Green Bay Packers games this year, you can go online in the middle of the game and hear from Tom Silverstein. You can talk to the reporter who's in the stadium covering that game, which is so far removed from the way the world worked when I was delivering that paper. But that's the way we're going. Now, can we master it fast enough? Can the business model change quick enough? Can we fend off all the challenges of AI and everything else? I mean, that's the gamble, but my bet on that gamble is that if we stay focused on what only we can do in this community and serve the people in this community, we have a far greater chance than if we don't.
Hi, my name is Tracy Johnson, fellow Marquetter, so thanks for the work that you do. I'm very curious about the business model, like Steve was talking about, and how you balance the desire to help the community with the paid subscriber model. And I talk about it because I have a 99-year-old grandma who does not have access to the internet, and she's thinking about how she spends every single nickel. And sometimes the Journal Sentinel, might not be on that list. How do you balance that as a Journal Sentinel in Milwaukee? And maybe the broader question is, how is the industry dealing with that writ large?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, when I say the timing of the profession right now, and that it's so challenging for all those reasons. It's far, more, less expensive and more efficient to deliver that news online with far more, capacity to be able to talk to Tom Silverstein, to see it in video, to see the documents yourself, to go from one story to the next story to the next story. Yet there's still a substantial chunk of our audience who like to pick up that newspaper and read it. I'm one of those guys. I mean, I used to, my brother and I, we had two routes and we kind of shared them, and we went one down each side of the street. And there was Nino's Bakery was right in the middle of our route in River West where we grew up, and we would stop and get a chocolate milk and a jelly donut and sit there on the stoop and read the paper before we finished the route. So there is something still appealing about having it in your hand and to have a sense that when you're done reading it, you're finished, right? There's a different serendipity as well if you see it in the paper of, it's not just what the algorithm is feeding me, it's not just what I specifically sought out. So there is definitely a value there, and we do our best to keep the value in the print product by trying to put stories there that are a little more in depth, a little more forward spin to them, a little more enterprisey than you might get with just the score. We realize anyone, by the time they pick up the paper, they know the Packers lost, right? But they want to know what Tom Silverstein had to say about why they lost. So that's where we're trying to hold that value as long as we can for those readers who appreciate it and want it that way. At the same time, it's just one of, multiple ways we deliver the news, and it's probably the least flexible, least, adaptable that we have, but we're doing our best to maintain it and keep it strong. Thanks so much. Yeah.